Hi Mike, nice to be here. Perhaps at first, would you like to introduce yourself to our readers?
So I'm Mike Verdu. I'm the franchise lead on Battle for Middle-earth for EA.
Okay. So you presented me Battle for Middle-earth 2 today. What do you think, in your opinion, is the biggest improvement in comparison to the first part of Battle for Middle-earth?
I think the thing that we're most excited about is the fact that we're able to bring you new races and places and heroes and battles because EA has consolidated the Lord of the Rings rights from the books and the movies. So we're able to bring you new locations inside of Middle-earth, new creatures, new heroes, all visualized in the style of the first game, which is very true to the Peter Jackson films.
In terms of gameplay, what, in your opinion, is the biggest improvement in terms of gameplay compared to the first part?
So we're all about adding a depth of strategy. We are completely changing the way you build out your base. It's an RTS game, and so we're giving you a lot of control over the way you set up your fortresses. We're giving you a lot more control over your units. We're introducing a new mode of play on the world map of Middle-earth, where you'll be fighting a strategic AI for control of Middle-earth, which are all very exciting things that we think will appeal to people who play RTS games and love the genre.
Can you explain how the new mode of base building will work in the new game?
So in Battle for Middle-earth 1, you were somewhat constrained with where you could put your structures on the map, how you could build out your base. If you remember, we had castles or camps, and inside of those you had these little building pads, and you clicked on the building pads to determine what structure you wanted to put there. That's somewhat limiting for people who want to bring a certain amount of creativity to base building, creativity and strategy. So for Battle for Middle-earth 2, we're opening it up. You can build structures anywhere on the map, so we're building back, build anywhere. And in addition to that, we have what we call our fortress system, which allows you to trick out a central building, kind of like the command center in a traditional RTS game, with all kinds of very cool upgrades. Defensive upgrades like trebuchets, if you're playing Gondor or Men of the West, which is one of the sides in Battle for Middle-earth 2. Boiling oil to pour down on your enemies, towers that have archers in them, all sorts of very cool things that let the player invest themselves in the base and customize their defenses.
Okay. A lot of our readers had a small problem in the first Battle for Middle-earth. They really loved these story-based missions, like the Battle for Helm's Klamm, obviously, but they somehow got bored with these generic missions where you had to fight with your Rise of Rohan and destroy every camp around the map. What will you do about that in the Battle for Middle-earth 2?
So our single-player campaign is about the conquest of the north part of Middle-earth. And if you're playing good, you can play the elves and the dwarves, unite the elves and the dwarves into an alliance to fight off the forces of Sauron, which are coming over from Mordor. If you're playing evil, then it's all about the conquest of the north, where you're taking over the north part of the map. But the story missions are very much big set-piece battles like Battle for Helm's Deep or Minas Tirith in the first Battle for Middle-earth. We're not doing a lot of those skirmish encounters where it's basically you against the AI in a very simplistic base-on-base encounter. We're saving that mode of play for what we're calling our War of the Ring mode, which is where you essentially can pick a side, start on the big living world map of Middle-earth and play against a computer opponent and take over Middle-earth any way you want. So you're playing against a strategic AI, you're taking territory, the AI is taking territory, and it's almost like a risk game form of risk game play on the highest level map.
In the first game, it was really cool to play with really famous heroes like Gandalf or Aragorn, and some I wonder, because a little bit in the Battle for Middle-earth 2 you have sort of heroes from the second row of the movie. How do you try to get players into the game to really think these heroes are cool and like to play it? Or do we have another idea for the heroes?
Well, there are heroes from the movies that weren't in the first game that were very high-profile characters. Think of Elrond, think of Arwen, Galadriel. These are very cool heroes that didn't appear in the first game that we're bringing into Battle for Middle-earth 2. There are also a whole bunch of very cool heroes in the books, which haven't been visualized on film or necessarily in a strategy game for Lord of the Rings. King Dain of the dwarves, Legolas's dad, Thranduil, Glorfindel, who's an elven lord. So we're bringing a whole range of heroes to life from the books. And we're also doing something that's very cool, which is allowing the player to create their own hero, to create and customize their own hero for Middle-earth. So you could ask yourself, as a game player, who would I want to be if I were a hero in Middle-earth? And we'll give you the chance to create a character that matches your vision of that hero. Do you want to be an elf lord? Do you want to be a wizard? Do you want to be the leader of the trolls? You pick a character, you customize his appearance, you customize the weapons that he has, and then as he levels up in the game, as he gains experience, you decide what spells he gets, what combat abilities he gets. It's your character. It's a projection of yourself on the battlefield, and we think this is a very cool way for players to get themselves into the game.
The story campaign of Battle for Middle-earth 2, as you told me, deals with a battle in the north of Middle-earth. This is only a bottom line in the book. So who is responsible for the story in the game?
We have some people in-house that are working on the story. We have a writer and a designer who are cooperating very closely to fill in the details of the war in the north and what happened up north. But the books did establish that Sauron sent armies up into the north part of Middle-earth that were significantly larger than what we saw in the battle for Minas Tirith in the movie Return of the King. And you remember the hundreds of thousands of orcs that got thrown at that city in that battle, and then think of a force much larger than that going up and doing battle with the elves and the dwarves up in the north part of the map. The Battle of Mirkwood, huge battles in Lorien, and in some of the regions up near the Misty Mountains.
If you have much larger battles than we had in the first part of the game, how do you want to provide that the player still keeps control of the battle?
Well, in Battle for Middle-earth 1, the troops that you commanded were organized into what we called hordes or battalions. So you would select a group of like 5 soldiers or creatures and control them as a unit. For Battle for Middle-earth 2, we're actually expanding the size of the battalion, so it's now a 3x5 unit with 15 guys. It feels very much more like an army game with these bigger, meatier units. So we think that will be very rewarding to players to.
So if you take control over several types of units like archers and pikeneers, it was pretty difficult in the first Middle-earth to really get control of them and really to make use of them in battlefield with their special abilities. You told me something about that you have a new system of formation. Can you explain how that works?
So in Battle for Middle-earth 1, we had the idea of combo formations, and then the hordes or the battalions that I was talking about earlier, you could control what formation they deployed in. For Battle for Middle-earth 2, we have an intelligent formation system that does a lot of that for you. And it's actually very cool. You pick a group of units on the screen, you select them, draw a box around them, select them as a group, and then when you use the cursor to highlight their destination, you'll get a preview of what that group looks like as they deploy into a formation at their destination. So you can actually have control over whether you want a long, thin, defensive formation or you want a dense group to assault an enemy force. And basically by moving the mouse with your finger on the button, you release, they'll move intelligently with the pikemen and the swordsmen out front, protecting the archers who are behind, and then the trebuchets are following behind them with cavalry on the flanks. So it's a formation that makes sense from a military standpoint. You don't really have to worry about combining units and doing all of that thinking. The game is doing it for you. And yet it's providing you with a lot more control than you had in the first game while that's happening.
On the screenshots that are in our magazine, you see ships battling. So can you tell us something about the naval battles?
It's very exciting that we're able to add a naval component to Battle for Middle-earth 2. So the elven ships, the white ships, the black ships, the Corsair ships that you saw in the films, we'll put under player control, and you can battle it out in the oceans off the coast of various parts of Middle-earth. This naval combat actually plays a key role in a number of the single-player missions, but you can also battle it out in multiplayer and in skirmish mode between ships.
Okay. So because of the naval battles, you have a new water engine. Can you tell us about how you improved the old game engine, the 3D engine?
So adding Navy to Battle for Middle-earth required a whole bunch of new technology. We have a new water system that does amazing things. It's highly reflective. You have waves. If it's translucent, you can see down to the ocean floor and get depth cues about the shape of the ocean floor below, and it looks just really beautiful. And then the ships themselves, we added a lot of code so that they have mass and inertia, and so they pick up speed very slowly, and then they turn very gracefully. The sails will change direction based on the direction of the wind. The ships are actually a lot of fun to play with just as units in a sandbox. You just drop a ship in a water map and steer it around. It's a lot of fun. And then you take it the next step and you go into combat. And it really does add a dimension to gameplay that wasn't there before.
Okay. The multiplayer mode from Battle for Middle-earth was we liked it very much. How will you expand the multiplayer mode in the second part of the game?
So we have a host of new maps. We're making some improvements to the way the game does everything from matching players against each other to the tournament mode. The heroes that I talked about earlier, the custom created heroes, you can actually bring them into a multiplayer game. So you can take your hero into combat with your friends online, match them up. You probably won't know exactly what they're bringing to the party, which makes for a very interesting gameplay. And for people who are very serious about their online gaming and track their stats in ladders and want to play in tournament play with a level playing field, we'll have tournament mode, which essentially has no custom created heroes in it, so that everybody is playing with the same set of rules. But if you want a free-for-all where you're bringing your hero and you want to see what everybody else brings, and the game has a sort of an edge to it, it's very exciting that we have this element of customization to the multiplayer. Also, we will have co-op battles where you can attack or defend these big landmark fortresses in Middle-earth. So you can team up with your friends and defend Helm's Deep, or team up with your friends and attack Minas Tirith. So that's something new from the first game as well.
Okay. So with the new Battle for Middle-earth, you obviously will have some new units, some new factions. Can you tell us a little bit about the new game content?
So we are creating 3 entirely new factions. We have the elves, the dwarves, and then a new side for evil called the goblins. And the goblins are all about cool monsters and creatures that have been kind of twisted by Sauron to the side of shadow, like spiders and cave bats and trolls. And the elves are all about elemental magic, nature. Elves might summon a flood or a windstorm onto the battlefield, but they're superb warriors. They're a lot of fun to command. The dwarves, if you think of Gimli in the film, they're extremely tough. They move slow. They're very good at building things, and they construct these elaborate fortresses in the style of architecture that you saw in Moria. And they're also good at tunneling, and you can think from a gameplay standpoint how that might be a cool thing. And they're also very good at tearing other people's structures down. We also have the existing units from Battle for Middle-earth 1 and the structures. We're combining Gondor and Rohan into a side called Men of the West, and then Mordor and Isengard make a return appearance with some new units that we're adding.
Will you have some new superpowers, like the Ents and Battle for Middle-earth 1?
So one of the very cool things about Battle for Middle-earth 1 was that you could summon the army of the dead, or a Balrog, or allies of various kinds like the Ents that you were talking about. We're doubling down on spell powers for Battle for Middle-earth 2. There'll be a lot of cool stuff in there. The ability to summon a dragon, which is really freaking cool. The ability to summon the Watcher, which you saw in the Fellowship. You can put him down in the middle of the battlefield. He'll come up underneath your enemy's army and completely disrupt them and he's pretty good at taking out buildings in an enemy base as well. And you can look for a whole bunch of new powers as well. We're pretty excited about him.
Okay, thanks a lot for the interview.